At the root of it, if your filter is dope shit only, there's a lot of people that are going to follow a filter for what's dope. And there's a lot of things that can come from that, and having kind of them serve as a gatekeeper and a curator of things that are pretty freaking cool, then there's a lot of ways that can evolve and go. Welcome to Decentralized Dawn, where lifelong friends Chicago and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age. In this episode, we take a deep dive into the world of NFT sensation Azuki. Again, I'm Disco, and I'm here with my co-host and partner Chicago, and so begins this episode of Decentralized Dawn podcast.
All right, I'm excited.
It's finally here.
It is finally here. So here we go. Our first inaugural podcast. We've been planning for this for 6-7 weeks now, getting all the gear ready, getting all the slides and upgrading all the microphones and headphones and whatnot. And now we're here. So I am fired up.
Yeah, I guess you could say we kind of started planting the seeds even for this exact episode, the first episode, when we reconnected and were able to be in Las Vegas for the Azuki event. So it's kind of from there it kind of has come to life, and I'm excited to delve into this. And I know that you've been pretty tied into the space and tied into Azuki specifically, so I'm dying to kind of see some of the things you put together and things we can dig into. So let's get it going.
Yeah, I'm excited. The bringing you to Las Vegas for the Azuki Vegas party was super fun on my part because, as Disco said, we grew up together. We've known each other since we were 6 or 7 years old. And it was really cool to bring someone who is newer to the crypto and NFT space to really put a lens from, I don't want to say a normie because he's not anymore. He dove in a couple of years ago, but especially from Azuki and from the NFT standpoint, someone who is relatively new, who has a perspective that I'm just too close to all this stuff. So we started talking about it a whole bunch in the last couple of months. He went to Vegas with me, and it was amazing just to have a gut check, be like, what do you think of this from an outsider's perspective and a non-holder's perspective?
Yeah. And just by a little bit of background, I have had experience over the years working with lifestyle brands and, the kind of the DJ scene and the electronic scene when that kind of came around. So I was just fascinated from the jump of seeing a brand starting to develop and how it's coming together. And, there's a lot of things that are extremely interesting and compelling about Azuki, to say the least. So I think we're going to nestle into a pretty nice conversation today. And we do have two different perspectives, but we look at things from kind of an open-minded perspective.
Yeah, I think so too. And just hearing different perspectives as I go through it, I bought my first Azuki on the left, 6501 on reveal day. And, being from Chicago, thus the name, I used to skate near Jordan. So this was near and dear to me. And when I saw that one immediately, that was the one that I got. And I sported that on Twitter, now X, for a good year until I got my CryptoPunk. But this one is near and dear to me, and Azuki it's a fascinating ecosystem, and there's so much that these guys have done right. But obviously with the elemental drop, there's a lot that went wrong, and what we want to do today is just break out, just sift through everything. Like this is one that even if we didn't have a podcast, it was kind of bothering me after the launch. Like, I do think these guys, the Chiru team, that is, I know that they care, and I know that they put so much work, and the artwork is just beautiful. The community is amazing. And I wanted to kind of deep dive and I think the fudsters of Azuki they're going to get something out of this, but the super fanboys and the garden protectors are going to get something out of this too, because this is going to be if we do this right, it's going to be a very nuanced take on something that I wanted to do anyway for the last couple months.
Yeah, and ever since I was introduced to the community, even from just the art perspective, it's nothing if not compelling. And looking at the one that you got originally, it's incredible, because that's what they always say, with people getting into NFTs, right? It's get something that identifies with you, and you don't necessarily have to look at metrics or this or that, but something that kind of lines up with your soul and lines up with kind of your identity. And it's ironically interesting that you happen to get something with some J's and you used them for skating back in the day. So it's kind of a perfect onslaught or intro into a community when you can find a piece of art that really resonates.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you said it best right there. There's a sense of, you get a PFP or an image that really resonates with you, and you feel a part of this bigger community. And I think it'd be hard to argue of all the collections and all the drops that have been out there. I mean, the Azuki artwork, and I grew up liking anime, but I wasn't like super anime guy at all. But I just, this artwork just hits on so many levels, and it's fascinating. Before we get into this, I do want to, the nuance is a word I'll probably say a lot, on Decentralized Dawn, but there was a group I want to dedicate this show to, a couple of Azuki, some of my favorites and some of the most positive folks in the garden, and that'd be Ilan and Junie for sure, and then of course all the sense of beans, CCW, Ebe, Clappy, JT, Alex, Broke, Omega, Sammy, Sad Boobs, and of course our fearless leader and the guy who brought us all together, Airport. And I just wanted to give a shout out to them, because when the Zagabond FUD happened last year, that's when we all kind of came together, and we were still all super gung-ho Azuki, but we were also pissed, so we weren't the fist pumping, circle the wagons and protect the garden at any cost, but we weren't the fudsters on the other side either. So it allowed us, a lot of times the opinions I have here will not be their opinions by any means, but a lot of influence and a lot of the intricacies and kind of nuance of this whole NFT space. And some of the ideas definitely were inspired by some of these great folks. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely.
So yeah, let's get into it. So when we get into this, Disco and I want to keep this a chat ongoing and live, but I actually did put some data together, because I wanted to see, especially on the money side, I wanted to see why, what happened, and is this just the end, or is this just a really bad bear market, and what happened? So again, these are my two bags. Early on, I got Samuel Gildas to animate this for me. Sam is awesome, and he's probably done hundreds of these things by now. But I've had 5 or 6 Azuki. I flipped a couple, mostly at the right times, but these are the 2 that I still hold, and probably the most near and dear to me. When I got my Azuki, I wanted them to tell a story, and I wanted to be able to tell a story with the Azuki, and these 2 fit the bill for me. So had to show off my bags first, of course. So first, let's get into it. I mean, everybody on Twitter, obviously, so many takes, every day there was 50 more takes than the last day. And there was a lot of good ones. There was a lot of stupid ones. There was a lot of FUD, and there was a lot of circle the garden wagons. And there was a lot of big holders who were pissed too, who vocalized, and a lot of them doubled down and stayed, and some of them left. And I think both answers are kind of correct, but this isn't going to be new to anybody, not groundbreaking, but why are holders so pissed? And it really boils down to, I think everybody felt that Azuki and Chiru Labs made a $40 million cash grab on elementals. We all went to Azuki Vegas. You and I had fun. We saw a bunch of people. We went to the warehouse party, and we had a good old time. Yeah, and we knew something was coming, right? We assumed it did, but the amount of rush that happened after that event, I mean, I think minting was Monday.
Yeah, and wasn't it like a really short window? Like, wasn't there something going on with that?
Yeah, it was. I think it was a 10 or 20 minute window. It was, Other Deed had something similar, I think, where it was a very short window. Gas fees just went through the roof. It didn't have to be that bad. And Azuki had never had gas problems because of, ER721A. It's just a very efficient contract, and you got Saigar, who's just a genius with the solidity controls. So Azuki's never had that problem, and so it was just very uncharacteristic to do, and it definitely pissed holders off. But as I kind of go down this list, I'm gonna just share some of the elementals that did drop Monday. So it was a super quick mint, right? In 10 minutes. Gas did explode. Some people couldn't get it and were pissed. I'm sure some of the people who didn't get it might have been happy because they probably could have gotten stuff cheaper. I may be one of the few ones that was just, I don't know, my spidey senses were tingling a little. I did not even, I had the window open and I was like, maybe I will, maybe I won't. You got what was it? It was 2 ETH, and you got, for every Azuki you held, you got to mint one, I believe.
Yeah, and I remember, like, one thing to say, like, I remember there was a sense of expectation, before the party, before they did the, check your wallets or anything like that. There was an expectation that something big was coming. And I remember afterwards, I was talking to you and I was like, well, maybe I'll get in and maybe I can, get one of the elementals. You're like, there's no chance you're going to be able to get one of those. They're going to be scooped so fast. So it just kind of spoke to the confidence of everybody that I met that weekend in the community about the execution that the team would be able to pull off. So I think that's kind of important to note. And that was also, when the whole space was in a slightly different place than it is now. It was a little more bullish in terms of the opportunity, but there was just a really, really powerful belief in what was to come out of that Vegas event. So expectations were super, super high before they dropped the elemental stuff.
Yeah, they absolutely were. And, nobody really knew what to expect. It was all a surprise. And, that's what the NFT space does. It's all about, kind of leading along, stringing along a little, keeping the mystery. But, again, while I have why the holders are so pissed, slide up here, I'm showing different elementals. And one of the biggest reasons that they're super pissed is like the elementals art is awesome. It totally delivers. It really, and if you think about it, from Steamboy, of course you're going to learn from the little nuances of the first collection and you're going to make it better. The problem is with an OG 10,000 collection, if you're an OG, you don't necessarily want it better. So what I did here was put my red, who's a 420 Fireball. It's one of only 2 in the whole collection. And wow, do I sound like a nerd right now? But I really resonated with this one, and but I'm putting the new ones around it, and the whole mid rares in Azuki. I think these and me and people who hold a bunch and people who hold the mid rares got screwed the most because at some point in 2022 or early 23, you paid a premium for those. And now you've got the kids, you've got the animals, you've got like 23 or however many more different background elements. And, a lot of them are super cool and resonate with different people. Now instead of just an acoustic guitar, you got an electric guitar. Like, you have more things to kind of fit your personalities. I mean, the art is absolutely amazing, but the point again is I love the bucket heads. They're so cool. Those were so many things like that. The sloths I love. Like, there's so much strong stuff in the collection, but it just overshadowed the main collection, especially those mid rares. That's where it really tanked the hardest.
It's an interesting perspective on it, because for me, looking at it, I'm like, you know, they improved. You know, it was kind of like a 2.0, and I'm like, oh my goodness, look at this art, and look at the kind of diversity of what they're exposing. You know, I found a set that had skis, and I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. You know, so it's a weird situation, because they almost are getting punished in a degree for evolving in a great way. So it's, you know, it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. But when you start seeing the sloths and you start seeing the animals, it's like, whoa, where can they go with this? So down the road, long term, maybe it opens up more doors. I'm not sure, but it is interesting to see something with a great drop that's even probably, you know, slightly, you know, taking the lessons from the first one and innovating and even making it more kind of more accessible and more awesome, you know, yet there's, you know, you got to look at how they, you know, how they take care of the original people in. So it's a very interesting point to look at.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the big elephant in the room, obviously, is, you know, when you go from 10,000 to 30,000, you know, and obviously two different collections. And, you know, if you look at Bored Apes versus Mutant Apes, that went from 10 to 30,000. But I, you know, sometimes I think Yuga did things just like paved the way for everybody, and it worked, but it didn't work for those who followed. And in this bear market, I think with Azuki in a bull market, you know, the elementals were too close to the OGs. And I think that was a big problem. And I think that would have been a problem anyway, but in a bull market with a bunch of new people wanting to come in, it probably, I don't know if it would have been fine. The OGs would have sank for sure, but it certainly wouldn't have gone from 17 ETH to 3.69 ETH, which we'll get into. But, you know, you add beans on top of that, you're at a 50,000 PFP collection now. And the beans obviously are a whole different vibe. And there's so many great community members just focusing on the beans, and does such a great job at it. But again, you're in a bear market, even in a bull market. Now you're at 50,000. You can, unless you do some burn mechanism, you know, like Oddities did, you know, with Moonbirds or something, which maybe that'll work, maybe it won't. Like you can't 50,000. Now you've got them, and that's just, you know, a whale is only going to hold so many Azuki or elementals or beans. You're you know, at some point when something like this happens, you're not going to go from holding 10 to holding 80. You might, if you're holding 50, you're probably to go down like, I need to lighten my load here a little bit, you know, because when liquidity dries, it's gone. It goes from, you know, Noah's Ark to desert immediately, overnight, right?
But there was also, just to remember the time, like there was a lot of pressure on that event and on this drop to kind of, I hate to say like save the NFT space, but it was kind of like the one thing that could have kept momentum going. And, you know, we've seen what played out afterwards, but there was a lot riding on it, and they were sitting on some pretty freaking nice art, you know, and pretty interesting concepts. So you got to look a little bit at the timing and how it went. But at the end of the day, they did drop some pretty amazing art into the ecosystem, and, you know, how much of it was timing, liquidity, pressure, you know, XYZ. That's what we'll kind of get into as we keep going, I think.
Yeah, good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to talk about it somewhere. But yeah, Azuki, you know, we got to remember the bear market had already started. Azuki and DeGods were really the only last two that were keeping things propped up, because everybody knew something big was coming. And, you know, Azuki was trading at 17 and everything was dandy. Everything else had already tanked from February 23 into the summer, and Azuki and DeGods were just the last two holding, just propping the whole industry up. And I think once this fell, it just, the dilution was just, it was an absolute killer. So again, just kind of setting up now, but really people are pissed because of how quickly they did it. They didn't really confer with anybody. And, you know, maybe you don't have to confer with holders, but I don't know, if I was at Chiru, like I would have Spirit DAO on my speed dial, you know, and obviously you can't divulge everything to everybody. And I'm sure they do have these guys on speed dial, but this was such a miss. It makes me ask the question, like, I firmly believe that they did not know how bad this would tank, but I suspect they knew there would be some fallout. So as we get into this, I've got a couple theories. So yeah, I mean, just the art is just fire.
Yeah, I could just keep looking at them and being like, oh, that one's super cool, but we got to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I really wanted to do here, really for my own edification, is just follow the money. So this chart it's a simple chart. The price in ETH is your skinny blue line. And for those listening to us, I will explain it as best I can. But, if you hear something interesting, it's always good maybe to look at on the podcast, look at the time and check it out on YouTube if you want to see it. But price in ETH is the skinny darker blue line. Light blue gray is the volume. So as you can see from the launch in January 22, the mint reveal, the volume is just lights out. At this time, this was only my second mint. Nuclear Nerds was my first, only a couple months before. So I know Disco alluded to it before, but I've been in crypto since 2015. And he's newer to the space, but I didn't get into NFTs until fall of 21. So I was a little late to that game, but got lucky that Azuki was the second one I was looking at. So January 22, we have the mint reveal, and usually things after reveal, like even if they go up later, they go down. Azuki did not do that. And it was a few collections have just kept going up in meteoric rise that Azuki had. So upon reveal, where a lot of people think they can wait for the little 1-2 ETH pullback, it went from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. Wow. To 31. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So by April, for the first garden party, which I was at, and that's where I met Ilan and so many other cool folks, that's where the infamous now check your wallets beans drop was. And those beans before reveal were going for, I want to say they peaked at like 5, 6 or even low 7 ETH. And a couple smart guys there were at least trading one of the two. Remember, you got 2 for every Azuki. So that was a huge win. And as you can see, the price goes up. We maxed at about 31.8 ETH. Different exchanges had different numbers, but that's around where we were. We were well over 30 ETH, and the volume is just going bonkers, right? So that was the heyday, and I would say this is where it was definitely a win-win. And then you can see the volume. You're getting into May. That's when the Zagabond FUD came out. That's when he was doxxed by Pauly and the whole funk thing. And I'm not going to go into super detail there. Everybody else has covered this way more than me, but it was a bummer, but a lot of the people that I knew, we stuck around and we were bummed, and we knew that Zagabond had to kind of change his tune, and Azuki and Chiru Labs had to be more humble, but we knew they had a good product and that they were very smart folks, and they had a good game plan. So
really quick. So
please.
That news came out like right at the peak, and then essentially seems like people stuck together. Right. And that was it was kind of a testament to people believing in the project, in the garden, in the community. Like people kind of work together to be like, hey, we're going to keep going with this and we believe in them and everything like that. But was that kind of the first piercing of the veil, so to speak?
That was definitely the fall from grace. I mean, you look at the chart, I mean, it was still in the 30s. Yeah. It just, that Zagabond FUD, look at that volume meter in early May there when it all happened. Like the volume it's actually the highest volume trading that Azuki's ever had. And it's whatever, we're in 1.5 years. It was just insane, the amount of volume there. So, but to answer your question, there was 3 camps. There was the people who were just disgusted when they found out who he was, Zagabond was, and he's doxxed out there. I'm not gonna. That's not worth getting into. It doesn't matter. But so there was the camp that bailed and were so pissed and were super vocal there. There was the people who missed out on Azuki and faded it or whatever. And because remember, even a lot of the influencers, Azuki was very grassroots. Like they might have had some influencers promoting stuff, but the big names at that time, the big influencers of the early 22 Twitter era, they weren't pushing Azuki at all. So I think some people were definitely happy to dance on the premature grave of Azuki, which, is going to be a reoccurring theme here. It's like, they're done and they're never done. Right.
Yeah. But that's interesting to think just really quickly that it organically came out with a loyal community, like from the very beginning. It wasn't like it was, just a bunch of hype. And I think that comes down to the fact that the art speaks to people and, the ties and the ethos of kind of being a streetwear brand and all those things really resonate. So there's something really in the DNA of it that attracted a lot of people organically.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there was, like I said, I got in on reveal day. So I kind of knew about it before, but I didn't even know how to get a whitelist spot. So, but there's guys in some of my groups who have been in since way before reveal, where they were all working on like derivative art and kind of helping the team. So there are people there's a name for them, like OG Beans or something. But yeah, so the community was already so solid. I know Ebe is one of those guys who's just has been there from the beginning and just been such a good positive voice for the whole ecosystem. So when all this FUD happened, it was a bummer. And as you can see, the volume literally just cratered to almost nothing. It's the lowest volume in the entirety of the collection that we ever see. So, that lasted a good quarter, right? 2 or 3 months of just low trading. But what's interesting is we only hit about a 5.8 ETH or around thereabouts bottom. So yeah, it bottomed out, and obviously from 31, it tanked. But in hindsight, when you kind of look at the bigger picture from our vantage point now and in fall of 23, it wasn't terrible. Had Azuki, it's an interesting thought exercise. Had the FUD never happened, like had Zagabond not had anything to do with Funks and had someone not tried to literally extort money from him, because they knew he was successful and had such a great product on his hand, like, would Azuki have gone from 31, 33? I mean, you got to remember at this time, Bored Apes peaked, I want to say at 145, 150 ETH. I mean, they were, I think that was around the era they were skyrocketing. So Azuki, I mean, hindsight's 2020, but Azuki could have risen to that level very easily. I could see an argument for both sides, but that definitely crushed it. There's definitely, in crypto, just like in anything, there's scammers everywhere, and there's people who just thrive on negative news and wanting to see people fail. So almost every collection that's successful goes through this baptism by fire. So, I mean, was this one worse than others? Somewhere in the middle. I don't think, Funks was just a derivative of CryptoPunks, and yeah, the guys made a lot of money and the guy just faced the other way. But this was a new system. Like, I didn't get into Funks. I didn't lose a lot of money in it, so I have no personal hard feelings on it. But what they did was not horrendous, in my opinion.
Yeah, and even if people got in at the mint, you're still above where you got in, so it didn't just completely fall off the wagon by any means. There's still an anchor, and that anchor obviously is tied to this commitment to the community.
Like you said, everybody's winning. So at 4 ETH, I was winning, and I got the Fireball 420 at 11 ETH. I'm not winning with her anymore, but I wanted to hold her anyway. But so if you got in at 9 ETH, 13 ETH, like you go up to 31 ETH, you're just like, everybody's winning and everybody's feeling good and everybody's drunk, when you're on the top of the mountain, all you think is it's only going to keep going up, and now we're in the bear and we're in the darkest part of the forest, just before dawn when it's darkest we only see the bear. It's so hard to see the other side when you're in the one you're in, and that's the beauty of fear, greed, and just pure FOMO.
Yeah, you can't remember those feelings because they don't resonate in the environment anymore. So it's hard to remember when it's like, hey, we're just going up, baby. Like it's you don't see a lot of high fives right now, so it's a little different.
No, you definitely don't. So again, 5 ETH bottom, and then at the end of last year, things start to pick up. You get, October, November, December, volume's low, but it's trading, and the community, remember, is just getting stronger and stronger here. And we're going to show a couple things of what they built, but the community and all the spaces and just so many people meeting at these different parties, and it really just kept galvanizing, I don't know if that's the right word, the community and just bringing them together tighter and tighter and tighter. So, all right, so the volume's picking up. Obviously, the Las Vegas party was announced sometime in April. They basically said, hey, we're not going to New York again. That is the one party I missed, and I do regret that because I think that had like secret rooms. Like that one's my style, but I'll get into that later. But the volume's picking up big time because the NFT market at the beginning of this year, it wasn't that bad. And, Azuki basically said no to New York. I think Yuga said no to New York. Everyone's like, we're not going to make New York a yearly thing anymore. And Azuki obviously decided to do their own thing. So the volume's up. There's a lot of anticipation. New people are coming into the garden. And the price is really, it's really doing good again. And we hovered around that 14 to 17 ETH range, which I'm happy with. I mean, that's a great spot to be. It hung out there for most of this year. Now, one could argue part of it, when you announce the party, and the party is one of the big things, that it's going to stay at a certain level and, until something happens, and that it's either going to spike up or, in this case, unfortunately, it spiked down. So because when they announce the party, there's the assumption of something else is coming, correct? Yeah, there's a couple things. So when you announce the party, there's also like, you got guys with cash or just folks with a lot of ether, people who also like to go to the parties, like I don't want to give it away. We grew up together, but we're probably a little older than some of the folks out there. Right. So we probably have a little different perspective than most people, but remember when that party's announced, there's the whole FOMO of like, let me get an Azuki before the window shuts. So actually, if you can see the two little red lines, it looks like 3 or 4 weeks between the time the party, actually it's like 5 or 6 weeks between the time the party's announced and when the ticket sales closed. Because I wanted to see, like, when those ticket sales closed, is that when people bail? Nope. Because after ticket sales closed, it spiked and then it stayed put until the news came, right? So that's when the news came. The elementals were minted. The volume was the second highest ever behind the Zagabond Fund. And that's what, real clever play on words, but this is where the Chiru dilution falls. Again, I'm probably going to keep going back to it, but when you go from a 10,000 PFP collection to 30,000 and with beans 50,000, like, what did you expect,
Yeah. And I was always interested in, like, at the party, beans holders were invited and included. And it felt like beans was being utilized as an entry into the ecosystem, right? So it'd be like, people would be like, well, I got a beans, but I'm holding on to try to get da-da-da. And that seems like that served a good purpose at that point. And they kind of went to the well with that earlier. So then if they're then going to do the elementals on top of it, you got to manage a lot of different people's expectations on what can happen.
Beans actually did a really good job, and I can't think of their names off the top of my head, but a couple of guys really who had Azuki just sported beans on their timeline and really just went all in on beans, and Demna too got into the whole beans movement, and they really created their own ecosystem. And so to say it was aspirational, I would say is accurate, but I would also say they kind of created their own vibe too. It's kind of like, yeah, of course, if money or ETH is an issue, yeah, of course I'd love to have an OG, even if I'm going to sport my bean and kind of do IP stuff with the bean. So you throw elementals in there, and like you said, now you've got 3 collections. I almost feel like I'm seeing The Hobbit when it was like 6 armies and like, the orcs, the goblins, and the humans, and, the hobbits and everyone. It's everyone versus the dragon and and then this army came from the north. Like, that's 3 different collections you have to manage. And elementals, I think, is finding what its community is. That stuff kind of solidifies over time, but now you got 50,000. So how many whales and even medium to small OG holders are going to hold a ton of everything, Right.
Yeah. You almost have to kind of pick your lane within the communities, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So the current floor is a 3.69 ETH wall. And this wall is very interesting. This kind of takes us to the present, but we're not even remotely close to there yet. Cause like I said, when I deep dive, I want to look at this thing from as many different facets as possible. To
when Chicago deep dives, he's not using a snorkel. He's putting on the full gear and he's going deep.
Yeah, I should learn how to actually scuba dive. I've snorkeled and I love it, but scuba diving, I'm afraid to get the bends. I don't know.
It's a good Radiohead album, but keep going.
Oh, that is very good. So, Chiru, tone deaf, or calculated play, and now let's look at the money. I would say follow the ETH and what that answer is. And I don't know if it's definitive, but if you look at just the money. So in these numbers, I pulled these from a couple different sources. They're probably not exact, but they're in the ballpark. They're plus or minus 1 or 2% or whatever. The number's actually probably higher. But what I love about this chart that we put together is it tells you what part of the collection made what revenue for Chiru, right? The Azuki mint was at 31 million, but that was not the biggest money getter for them. It was actually number 3. The Azuki royalties, I broke out Azuki royalties in 2022 and 2023, and I did it just like with more of a blunt knife because I just wanted to see, there's going to be a whole royalty collection. I wanted to see kind of like if it was weighted one way or another. So I broke those out. So the royalties in 2022 was the most that they made. So, you think about it, you've got the collection released, they're working on stuff under the hood, but that's passive income. That's annuity, right? That's just revenue where you don't even have to earn it. And that was $43 million or thereabouts, right? The number 2 was, and just please interrupt me because, I'll just keep going. Interrupt me if you have any questions or any comments on it. But the Elementals mint that, we just had that had the big fallout, that was number 2 at about just under 40 million. I have about 37,340,000. Right. And then the Azuki mint was at the very beginning in January 22 was 3rd at 31 million. And if you look at everything else, the Golden Skateboard brought in 2.5 million, and I would consider that a big success. Bobu brought in $1 million, which I had forgotten about. I was researching this. I'm like, oh yeah, Bobu. I forgot I had to mint that. And there was a lot of Bobu. I can't remember how many. I think there's 50,000 of them. Like gas, because I bought one for one of my business partners, and I bought some for a couple people in the Web3 community who I know liked Azuki, and so I wanted to get them some too. But so there was a bunch of stuff I'd forgotten about. The ambush gear, that was $1 million. I did not get one of those sweatshirts, but they're starting to do partnerships with higher end brands. They're doing cool stuff. But and if you look at 2023 royalties, the number's super small at 2.3 million. So this really gives a good breakout of where the money is.
Do you think there's revenue tied to the parties as well?
That's a good question. I think the parties, let me think, because you got the swag at the last party. So they definitely made good money there. Yeah. And so again, I just wanted to see zip code. I know it's not 300 million unless we're missing something big, but yeah, they probably, I could see them. I mean, how many people do we figure were there? A couple thousand, maybe 1,500, 2,000 or something. I don't know. So, everybody's buying something probably. So I'm guessing they made a couple $100,000 on that, but that's just completely spitballing, making it up. So there was definitely other revenue streams, but I think renting, what is it, Hakkasan? I think renting the space is probably going to cost way more than they made. I think that's
but not if you look at the elementals mint under it. Like, who cares what it costs? If you got
right. That's a good point. I mean, they pump everybody up, and you come on, and a lot of people, not to beat a dead horse, but that mint was Monday, maybe Tuesday at the latest. Most people, some of these people are flying from all over the world. They're, you and I've got families. We left earlier. Some of these people were staying till Sunday or Monday. So they were screwed because, they didn't have the right hardware wallet to even mint this stuff. So it was just, that was a fail. That piece of it was definitely a fail.
A lot of them probably hadn't had any sleep over the last 3-4 nights either. So.
Right. Yeah. What kind of decisions are you making? And it was completely like, the surprise is great, but the 10-minute mint or 20, whatever it was, there was a couple 1-2 punches that just felt like, and obviously if you're going to mint, you better mint out, what is it in The Wire? Like, if you're going to go for the king, you best not miss. Like, you're going to mint, you best mint out. And they did, and then some. And remember, every single minted elemental, I'm pretty sure this is true, every single one was from an existing holder. So if you want to piss off, like you don't even piss off the whole community equally. You piss off your base, entirely, because they're holding your bags, So if you break it out, Azuki 22 royalties were about 33%. So about a third was the royalties from 2022 alone. But we already went through the numbers, I think, in pretty good detail. But, the net is about $131 million that they made on the stuff that we could more easily count in 18 months. I mean, wow. That's a pretty good haul for, a smart band of Web3 folks. Chiru, I think the founders list there's only like 4 of them. And then obviously with Azuki, there's, I'm guessing 15, 20 employees tops. Again, I should have done my research on that, but there's not a ton of employees. And I can't imagine, unless they have the nicest, place in LA on the top floor of some skyscraper or something, like, I can't imagine their overhead is massive, but
I think what just keeps jumping out at me from everything you've shown so far is that, so that much ballpark, whatever, that much revenue is generated, and the revenue is generated from the community, so if all of the elementals were from holders, like, it's a very loyal, committed community. And I think that deserves a ton of credit. And the question really is, are they leveraging the community, or is the community right in believing in this? Because they're building towards something that's going to be phenomenal. Because one of the things I noticed that I thought was really impressive was, to a person at the Vegas event, people were fanatical about telling me about how excited they were to own a piece of Azuki and to be a part of what's happening and where it's headed and where it's going. And that got me, like, going back to the hotel, not that, not super late in the night, and tossing and turning, like, dude, I got to get in on this. Like, this is the coolest thing. So however they're moving the buttons and doing what they're doing, you certainly have to commend the fact that they're able to inspire a community of people to believe in it enough to really put their money where their mouth is and generate that much for them. Now the question is, with that much revenue and with that many resources, is there a plan to execute and to take it to the level that it could become? Because there's no question with this affinity, I've never seen people more, and I hate to use the term bullish, but people more committed to being a part of it and proud of it. And you see that through the derivatives, and you see that through the stickers and just everything. It was just like, people were so proud and they were excited to kind of not be evangelical to me, but somewhat, be like, hey, these guys are doing this. It's so cool, and everyone was so tight that it really is a testament to something resonating extremely well. And those are the things that, if you look at brands that end up, really going to the stratosphere, they have an incredibly loyal base that'll follow and believe. And I think that's representative specifically of looking at how that revenue is broken out and what it's brought in.
Yeah, that's very well put. There's such a sense of belonging to the community, and again, you seeing that with fresh eyes was so cool, because I probably got to see that at the first party and just through different spaces and stuff. But yeah, it gets you that FOMO, and that hype gets you so ramped up and so excited about the possibility. You made a perfect segue kind of where we're going now. So, this chart shows total revenue for Chiru Labs and Azuki by month. And again, it's not to the 0.00001 ETH perfect, but again, it's super close. So, at mint reveal, the revenue is great, because remember, I showed you the biggest revenue generator was from the 2022 royalties before royalties went away, right? So, you get the revenue right at launch for the mint, and obviously it's just massive, but just look at the consistency of that revenue. At some point we'll probably do a show somewhere dancing around Yuga Labs, but they've taken VC money, and when you take VC money, you can't have a chart that looks like this, that revenue's super big and then it's good and consistent but trickling downward, and then it's literally gone, and then it spikes for another drop, and that's really where this problem was. So the revenue on these 2022 commissions was just phenomenal for them. And then, you get into the oasis, you get into the no royalty desert, which of course is when really from Blur came about and basically just said like, yeah, we're not going to honor royalties. And OpenSea's like, I don't got a choice. We really have to drop our royalty payments too. And that precipitated, and then you hit a bear market with no liquidity, and that dries up faster than you can imagine. But the big takeaway,
and both of those points have nothing to do with what Chiru or Azuki's doing. You know what I mean? Those are other factors coming into play that impact how they're going to build and survive as a brand. That wasn't expected necessarily, is my point. So you couldn't project
which part,
the Blur and the liquidity and all, like they didn't. Obviously it's up and down and you can't really tell what's going to happen all the time in the space overall. But, if you had people looking and projecting, like VC guys or whatever coming in there, they wouldn't have been able to expect that it was just going to go down like that. So it's, they got hit with a few things is, I guess, what I'm getting at.
Well, and remember, everybody did. It's almost like following, your favorite band or whatever. Like they're like rock stars. You're getting royalties on those album sales, and when you tour, you get the money in the t-shirt sales and you make money there. But, which I know in music we'll get to in another episode, where a lot of the money actually does come from the touring and just the sales of stuff, because the streaming revenues certainly aren't great. But, you're just a rock star. And then all of a sudden, your label comes to you and says, oh, hey, by the way, you don't get royalties on any of your album sales anymore, even though they're still moving. You just don't get it, like that's everybody's model got effed by that, and Yuga's fighting back but at the end of the day, I'm not going to get into a debate here. Maybe that's a show, maybe it's not, but I'm not going to get into the royalty debate. But it clearly sucked, and it totally screwed them up. But as a consumer, most people, if they don't have to pay another 5%, especially on 5, 10, 15, 25, right, $35,000 JPEGs or PNGs, then they're not going to.
But I guess my question is, do you think that royalty desert, which really sticks out, it's a great visual to look at. Do you think that then forced the hand to a degree to do a large elementals mint? Like, hey, this is our chance to kind of get some, powder for the keg moving forward. And maybe it was brilliant timing if you look at it from that perspective. I don't know.
They had to get another infusion of cash I guess where I take umbrage is I wish they had, now that I see the money, so take the 40 million elementals out. So you're at what, 90 million? We'll just rough number it. You're at 90 million. Like, that's a pretty good war chest for 16, 17 months. Why didn't they give better guardrails for the story so more people could could get character stories out with, like, start making the Star Wars universe? And I just felt like they dragged their feet, and now it's like you're doing it after the elementals. And one of my big gripes is, why didn't you start laying a lot of that groundwork before? You've got so many community members who are making, I mean, if you go onto Twitter, there's a guy who makes like 30-second to 2-minute animations, Azuki. I think he did like 7 or 8 of them. They're incredible. They're absolutely incredible. We know Azuki's going to get into short form animation soon, but just the guardrails for the story, like there's the drip, in my opinion, for the revenue personally. And this is maybe where I'm too close to it, because they don't owe me anything, but I think the drip of creating the ecosystem was too slow.
Okay. I'm going to counter with, just to keep the conversation going on that. What would have happened to holders and to the whole community overall if they didn't get the infusion from the elementals? So if they didn't get that, who knows where it would have gone? And then secondly, I know to us, these numbers seem, very strong, and like, how could you possibly, go through $90 million, or you have 140 million, you could be able to create Star Wars. Whereas, the reality is, on some of these shows, like even like a Fairly Odd Parents or these Steven Universe, you're talking like 300 to 600,000 per episode to produce one of these shows. And if you're looking at like a minimum price range for a animated video, could be anywhere between 10 to 20 grand. So when you look at like trying to really have a war chest to build a brand that could become, I don't want to say a Supreme or, anything like that, but if you're thinking like, oh, maybe this could work into these different Marvel ecosystems or whatever it may be, I think it's interesting to pull back and kind of look and compare that to how long it takes other brands to get moving. You look at, I keep going back to Supreme or Vans or any of that. 18 months in from those guys starting, they were nowhere near advanced as this. Like, this is moving.
That's a good point.
Light speed. Like, I don't know what's their real burn rate. I don't, we don't have access to that, so we don't know, what's going on with that. But if they have things in development, how long it takes to get things made and produced. So just a thought, like if they didn't get that extra, infusion from the elementals, maybe what would they be able to keep working on or not? So it's just a thought on that side of it.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, animation, I used to work in that world to a certain degree, and it's insanely expensive. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And, and they are going down that road. I guess and you make a very valid point, and I think that pushback is more than fair, because you're right. At 18 months, Vans, that was even before our time, not too far before, unfortunately, but it was before our time. Like, yeah, they were just a skate culture brand. And the reason Vans were so, they were a functional shoe. That grip on the bottom of Vans is, now I'm sure other shoes have figured it out and then some, but that it was the stickiest, best grip tape substance. I was a big skater growing up, and except for my Air Jordans that I skated in, that's why I have Azuki 6501.
Yes.
Like skating in Vans, we all did, until Airwalks and all the other stuff came out. So you're absolutely right.
And one other thing from that side of it, you're looking at, if you look at some of the old, the big success stories from a lifestyle brand perspective, a lot of them, at least that we're referencing, came from kind of the West Coast and from Los Angeles. And that is something interesting that Azuki's got cooking on it. Like, it takes a long time for things to infiltrate throughout an entire country and to get to the middle of it and everything like that. But I don't want to be like coastal bias, but a lot of cool dope does come out of, kind of the Southern California culture. And I think that it's interesting to note that they do have roots and anchors in there.
They have very good roots there. Yeah. And I think they're connected, not only there, But they're connected all over the world. I think, and I've always said this, what Azuki does better than any other collection, and I can't even think of a close second place. Their global reach is phenomenal. They just had a big party just a couple nights ago in Singapore. I think the skateboard auction, I think they were in China. They've had, I think 2 or 3 or 4 now big parties in Asia, and they killed it over there. Hats off to them for how well they have expanded there. But you asked, what if there was no cash infusion, would the community have galvanized? That's a good point. Because let's say Azuki, let's say they never did the elementals drop. They never had a party. That floor wouldn't have stayed at 17 all summer long. It would have trickled down. We would probably most assuredly be at least in the high single digits, if not lower. So, we're at 3.69 now. That's a little low. I think it's safe to say it wouldn't have gone down there because we wouldn't have had that massive dilution effect. But, I think it would have, it would have stayed stronger than at least had it not
That's
happened.
Fair.
Yeah. So one thing that I will say is the animation, you make a good point, and I'm actually, you've caused me to kind of back off that stance a little. My thing was you should have already had your pilot done and work with some of the best writers. And you know what, 18 months for a company that's got a long-term vision, you're right. That's absolutely nothing. I will go back to those guardrails though for the storyline, and maybe I didn't explain myself well enough before.
I bought my Azuki to create
I
a
bought
deep
my Azuki for a
storyline.
story, and when the Zagabond FUD happened, I actually stopped doing derivatives and I stopped writing the story. I'm not saying that was right or that was wrong. It's just what I did because I was like, I'm going to hold these, love the community, love the people I've met, love the Azuki I have, but I'm not going to be spending 0.3 to 1 ETH on these derivatives and I was going to start doing some animations and videos and really blow out those 2 characters, and I backed off from it. But what I wish they would have done, and shoulda, coulda, woulda, but I wish they would have created, start creating the big brush strokes of what the universe is. What is a spirit? What is a red? The reds and blues, for anyone who's held them out there can attest, reds and blues have gotten, not now, maybe it's better, but they've always been the value that a lot of us saw in them as the far sub to spirits, but there's only I think 500 of each of them. Those Azuki never really gave those in the collector's portal really a lot of juice. And now they give these things called badges for those, but they really didn't before. But I just wish I knew what a red and a blue was. So in broad strokes, and I know the counter argument is then you're not going to be as creative. And I guess I would say is the more you paint those broad strokes for the whole, Middle Earth, JRR, Tolkien world, or Star Wars or whatever, the more people can paint within there and maybe feel a little more confident to really go for it. Because the community is by far the strongest thing keeping Azuki at 3.69, literally, I'll show you in a bit, but the community is everything. As far as, royalties earned, I just wanted to see, we saw the desert, but this is what happened. And it's an interesting story from a couple perspectives, but one of them, look at all the blue. That's OpenSea when they were just literally, the money trees were planted and they were fully primed and they were just printing money. Nobody could touch them. You see Looks Rare got a little green in there, and they made a little run with their token and all the airdrop and all that, just dilution drama. But OpenSea just owned it. And then look, by the end of last summer, so, you get into really midsummer, June, July 22, royalties just tanked. So that tells you even more for Azuki. Those royalty numbers I had for you, that remember was the biggest piece, the 43 million. That was all the first half of that year. So the second half, like, don't get us wrong, that second half, if the first half numbers weren't so big, that second half numbers, they wouldn't look too shabby, but they pale in comparison. What are they, for the people who are listening, 1/10 of the early 22 days when the royalties were just kicking off. And then look at the end there. It actually goes down to very little. And then you see all the orange pop up, which is Blur. Like, I mean, OpenSea literally disappeared. Like, how'd you like to, remember OpenSea never did a token. Hey, good luck going public, guys. Like, no thanks. Yeah, I think that's a point.
By the same token, I don't mean to say token, but if you look at it, like, that's a business plan that just got eradicated. The
OpenSea or Azuki or all of the above?
All of them. You know what I mean? So you're sitting there starting a business. You're like, oh, great. We can count on, what can we count on for inflow? Oh, look at this royalty. This is, our big cash cow. Yeah. And it just gets 86th and, you're sitting there. So that's why I'm wondering, like, if you're sitting there, then maybe what else can you do but come up with a drop, for elementals to keep things going in the right way, but it's almost unfair. And I know that everything is fair in business, but everyone got sideswiped by this lack of royalty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we can aptly phrase this. I wish I put a little thing. This is the Blur wrecking ball, right? Like Blur bids and Blur points. I actually had a third Azuki, and those were my three core. She was a Kabuki face, and I love the Kabuki face Azuki. And when that whole Blur wall happened with
Maki and Franklin just Blur swapping thousands of NFTs with each other.
It was before the party. I'm like, let's just hedge a little here. So I threw one. I think it was at like 15. The wall, everything was at 17. Remember? So the Blur wall threw it to like 15.5. I'm like, I'm gonna take some money off the table. So threw that one in, and obviously now I wish I did them all and then rebought them back, but shoulda, coulda, woulda. But the Blur, just with royalties, just wrecked everything. It just wrecked it. So here's this slide put another way. Here is Azuki's royalty rate from the beginning in January 22 to now, but 5%, almost perfect to the penny, to, it's not at zero, but whatever the number just above zero is, that's what it is.
Zero-ish.
Right? It rounds to zero. It doesn't even round to 0.2. It rounds to zero. So that's the story, right? So and you're giving me great perspective, because I think there's some things that maybe I am too close to it. So one little side note, this is my theory, and someone out there smarter and has done more research than me might be able to disprove this, but I suspect, or it's a possibility, that that goblins basically literally gave the finger to all their holders, right? Goblins was the surprise hit drop, and they were kind of fun, and it was just weird and cool, and it was during kind of this mini bear, and it was awesome. It was a fun collection, and they were like, screw this, we're getting royalties. So they rewrote, they literally had the finger up. They went back to a placeholder. So your immutable NFT, now Azuki didn't do this is Goblins is setting up, but this immutable NFT you had gets a picture of flicking you off saying, hey, don't worry, you're going to get a 1-for-1 drop. Stay tuned on a new contract where we've got royalties baked in. Now, it's funny, Goblin Town of all collections, that's the one that I wouldn't see doing it, like almost for their irreverence. Like it didn't fit who they were.
Yeah, it didn't jive.
This anonymous team, irreverent. Like if I was holding a bunch, I would have not been pleased about that, just the handling of it. But so they went to a new contract. Everyone got, it all worked. They got their 101s, but it did not bode well for the Goblins, right? So remember, fast forward to Azuki. My gut is they launched Elementals knowing Azuki was at least going to take somewhat of a hit, because maybe then they could get that lock back on royalties. And again, someone out there, if you're listening, please comment on that, because I'd love to know more in that. But it's definitely a theory of mine. Was Azuki calculated or tone deaf? I don't know. I think both. There's the holder, right? the community, and then there's Chiru Labs, the guys and girls who make all the money on these sales, right? And the team. So at first, everybody won. Everyone was incentive aligned. The floor price is there in your skinny blue line, and the total revenue by month. So I just overlaid the two graphs I showed you before together. So, at first you're incentive aligned. Everybody's winning. Everybody's happy. And then you got Zagabond FUD there, but then you go to the other side to elementals, and this is where we're not incentive aligned. So Chiru, as you said eloquently, had to raise money, but the holders literally got left holding their bags. So that would not be incentive aligned. And it's a tough one. Like they if they're going bigger with the animation and they're gonna ramp everything up to whatever it is they're gonna do. They've given us a couple sneak peeks and we're going to talk about that, but that's why everyone's pissed. And that's why I wanted to look at the numbers. Like, it totally makes sense why they did the drop, but you lost a lot more people. The community is galvanizing, but my God, at what cost? Here's information on the fallout. So Maverick 23, I really like this guy. I think he's got good takes. And this one's interesting. So with his permission, I'm posting this, but he laid out, okay, pre-elemental market cap. You got the Azuki OG, you got the beans, the elementals, and you got the elemental beans, the unrevealeds, right? So you're looking pre-reveal. And again, you're at the peak of hype, so take it with a grain of salt, but you're at $326.5 million value of all of those. If you just take the price post elements. So just go literally have the party, have the drop. You go from 326 to 78 million,
a 76% drop in collection value
immediately. So, it's no surprise why people are pissed. So I love this chart. I do want to say Saraf, who's one of my favorite, folks out there, super smart guy. He's a big ordinal too. But he makes a good point, and I want to address that. He says, you're not entirely wrong, but not entirely right. Market cap in NFTs, there's no such thing. It's a total farce, because there is no, with ETH and Bitcoin, there's always a buyer and a seller. Now the price may be going down or up, but there's always a buyer and seller. With NFTs, that is not the case. When it dries, it's already a very illiquid medium in a bull. When it's a bear, again, the desert analogy, it goes to nothing. So his point is basically saying you can't look at market caps. And I hear what he's saying, and I think he's right, but I see what Maverick was doing. At some point, you have to compare it with something. So of course that wouldn't be the market cap of it. It's the reality is it's probably, call it a fifth of the value, a tenth, a fifth, a sixth, or whatever. It's somewhere in that range. What, like Chiru could sell the whole thing for, but it's when there's no liquidity, there's no liquidity.
Right. So the market cap argument is essentially assuming there's always a buyer for it, right? And the lack of liquidity means there's not going to be any transactions. So yeah, you can multiply it, but you still have to have market forces and people wanting to purchase that asset to justify a market cap, correct?
Yes. Well, remember, the more people that want to sell, and the more sellers there are, the price goes down, and then the buyers are like, wait, this thing is cratering. So it just craters. Yeah. It just craters so fast. The liquidity, there isn't enough. And let's say someone started selling a bunch, even at a cheaper price, because the liquidity is so low, the incremental unit going down of the price for each NFT sold is super steep. It's not like, Bitcoin or ETH where it's like, oh, well, it goes down a little because,
a couple
supplies
percent.
more. This is like tank. And then at some point, it's almost just non-existent. And, remember, people who bought high, like at some point you're like, what's the point of even selling at 3 now? Like,
you're stuck.
Right. You're just like it. You play the odds the other way before, as long as you're not super depressed or desperate for the money, you're just like, I'm going to ride this thing out. So Seraph, awesome point. But Maverick, I love
good stuff.
Yeah. I love the thought that he put into just like, let's, as a thought exercise, let's look at Azuki versus itself. What was the fallout of this? The other fallout, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but Azuki is number one in, with all these BendDAOs and all this loans and lending on your NFT, which is just head scratchingly stupid. Like why anybody would lend, and it's just so stupid because again, the more that sell,
you just said. Yeah.
Like a couple people sell and you got no liquidity and you're screwed. And then you've got to, you get liquidated. So Azuki at this point was the highest liquidated asset. So the fallout was big. So Chiru's moved affected a lot of people here. And again, I snapshot a lot of this in August. But Azuki was for outstanding loans behind Milady Maker. They were number 2. So just a lot of leveraged Azuki out there. And to be quite frank, like getting leveraged fat out of the system to get to a better, more stable, more liquid base price is a necessity. It's true in the stock market, and it's certainly true in NFTs. When you've got loans, you're just leveraging up and down, and you're like 2xing and 3xing both ways. It's just not a pretty look, and it doesn't work, and you can't get to a stable system again until all that washes out. Yeah, it's got to get flushed out of the system. In defense of Azuki, so it's like, this has been all about Azuki, but this chart is way too small for the screen, so I'll just describe it. This is the same time period, 2022 beginning to current. This is all ETH NFT sales volumes. I mean, it's all, dude, it's all dead. Like we are in a bear's bear, and that's why Disco and I what a perfect time to start a show and get into this stuff, like just in the depths of the bear. Our volume is so low, it's comical. So now we get to the second part and probably the fun part too. What is Azuki? What have they done well? What has Chiru Labs done well? And again, I'm very US centric because these are the parties I went to, and they've had great parties over in Asia, but they've had great events. The garden party, there were some hiccups. Some people who were in line, I flew out there for that party, literally flew out, met a bunch of guys for dinner and went to the party. And had someone not just been like, let's just get in line a little early, I would have flown out to LA, on a 4-hour flight and stood outside. And then I took a red eye home, or first thing in the morning. So I literally didn't even get a hotel. The flight was so early. I just slept in the airport. Like there was a lot of people who were pissed, but I got in super happy. It was fun. Met so many cool people there. That's where Ilan and I just hung in the booth and sat by the jacket and just hung. But the events Suzuki has thrown, they were great. I'd actually love to pause and get your opinion on, as a newer person in the NFT space, what was your take on the Vegas party?
I think my take on it was, and I don't want to sound like old man jaded, but a little bit old man jaded. Like I've been to a lot of nightlife events and a lot of large scale events at festivals and concert. I had a stint in the music industry, and I just thought it was fascinating how incredibly on the same page and motivated every single person was there. So that's one of the things, if you go to an event, technically you can have any DJ or this, that, or the other that's drawing it. But everyone was just so excited to see what was going to come next and to see what was being produced. So I remember there was a gentleman who's a holder that you had a relationship with, and he was like, kind of come with me, follow me. And we like, wandered down into the depths of, Hakkasan, and there was like a whole other scene going on. And I said it earlier, I just have never had that many people be that passionate, wanting to kind of side conversate with me, saying, hey, are you in on this? You understand how awesome it is? Like, I just feel so, and this is, kind of naivete to a degree, but they're like, just so happy to be able to be involved in something like that, in something like this community, and be involved with something that, is cool. And I think that when we look at when we look at it overall, they're talking about launching a worldwide brand with credibility and being cool. And we had, having the merch and the swag in there, but not the giveaway stuff, but like the things that you could purchase, like that takes a while to figure that stuff out too, and to figure out how to get those produced and what's going on. And we can debate the quality and we can debate all that, but they were trying to really, I think that they leapfrogged where any brand I could imagine could be within 18 months of inception. And I'm sure there's, I'm not counting how much time and months and years or whatever were in place before the mint. We're kind of talking like, hey, the brand, it all started at the mint, but obviously it had to have started before then to be able to, develop the assets and everything from that perspective. But it was almost like going to a rave or a music festival where everyone's just down with the movement of whatever it is. And that was really what my biggest takeaway was. I couldn't find anyone who was salty about being there. They're all like, dude, I'm here. And a lot of the people, maybe hadn't been to a lot of big nightclubs and stuff like that. And it was super cool. And we had a little barbecue, kind of lunch or dinner before the skate party thing. And I just was really interested. There was some folks who sat at our table that just got into town just for the event from Tokyo. And it's like, it was just the reach of it and the credibility of it. Like, that's what really hit me, from the point of, it is still very underground, and NFT overall, the whole space is still pretty niche, but it felt like a much more fully developed brand underneath it. And again, I go back to the community and the passion. I just felt that people are really, sipping the lemonade and want to see what comes next, and want to give this brand the most credit possible to really become something special. And I just kept going back to the fact that this is such an early stage situation, and to see the scope and passion of the folks that attended, and granted, you're only really going to get people that are very passionate about it to fly to, an event or anything like that. But it was a lot of community that really felt aligned with, hey, we really want to see where this can go. And hey, we're really excited to be here. So it wasn't jaded. It wasn't, sour. It was just a lot of anticipation and excitement. So I don't know if that was a long-winded soliloquy.
No, that's a great answer. And again, I thank my lucky stars, because you give me perspective that, it makes me realize from, we've both started multiple businesses, and it makes me realize you get emotional and attached to something and really get in with the community. When you get let down, it feels so much bigger than it is. Now, obviously, it's a lot easier to look at it from the sidelines and be like, actually, because what I hear you saying is like, actually, dude, like 18 months, like they've had some hiccups, and the elemental drop, obviously, like, you're pissing off your core holders, but there's a lot of cool things here that they've done. So I guess I would follow up to you then with a question: Is this premium club is a premium club the best use case for Azuki and NFTs in general?
Premium club meaning what?
Like having these global parties and like just being a part of this exclusive group that has different events all over the world. I guess just doing that, I'm almost answering my own question. Like, that sounds almost too thin to me, but like, I guess I asked that because it made such an impact on you. Just like, wow, like I knew about Supreme. I saw the rise and fall there. You used to live on the coasts, and you're still always around the coast, but like, is a premium club and a premium brand, clothing would obviously be the first thing that comes to mind. Is that where Azuki would thrive?
I think that the way I look at it is there's lifestyle brands. And if you can be a lifestyle brand that is true to elements that are authentic, and I hate to say the term cool, but cool, you can go a lot of different ways. And I thought what was interesting is, I think it's really too early to judge where this is going to go. I see that there's elements to potentially releasing music. We're talking, they had a MC come up that was kind of affiliated with Azuki there. So you have all these different things that they can get into. And if you have at the root of it, I hate to say this, but at the root of it, if your filter is dope shit only, there's a lot of people that are going to follow a filter for what's dope. And there's a lot of things that can come from that, and having kind of them serve as a gatekeeper and a curator of things that are pretty freaking cool, then there's a lot of ways that can evolve and go. So I think that, things always start smaller and then all of a sudden they're not, or, anything from the underground. It's like, oh yeah, you see a couple people doing it, then it gets picked up at Nordstrom and it's, jump the shark and it's everywhere like that. But having this lens and filter of, kind of a mission of like, dude, we're only going to do stuff that's, really cool. That really does help. And it goes down to some of the details. Like, we can gloss over the event or, oh yeah, they did Hakkasan, but also the night before at the skate thing, that was cool as hell that they had like all the different decks on the wall and you kind of reveal that. And that's not something some, super mature older brand would pull off with as much kind of edge and flair as they did. So when I look at it, I look at something that is just sitting down to breakfast in terms of what it can be. And as long as you kind of curate a high quality element of it and you don't dump things that, aren't of the brand. And that's why I kind of go back, when I look at the whole thing and I haven't bought one and I've been flirting with it and looking at it, like it makes me think a lot more about the elementals as, something that I may want to jump in on and be kind of my on-ramp into the space. Because as we said in the very beginning, I don't know how long we've talked, but at the very beginning we were talking about it, like you can't argue with the quality of the art and the creativity with what they did there. And it's evolved. Yeah. So for me to look at something that started with something that was really cool and they've only kind of elevated from that, I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up a good point too. The two guys that played, Sire don't play. So he's kind of a homegrown and he's awesome. He did a great job. And then I believe it was Juku was the other one at the event. And then the skate warehouse party was done by Dooku, and I know there was others, but I know he was the main guy, and I thought they did a great job with that event. And the whole I don't remember the name of it, but you're right, just the we're going to get into community now, but just the fact that was so community led. And it was kind of cool because we onboarded with that app that basically had kind of our quote unquote immutable ticket. It was through Ethereum somehow. I can't even remember the name of the app now, but
something.
Yeah. And, Azuki used it for their party, but, you had to go get your wristband because they had to, obviously the big party, you got to kind of double down and be extra sure everyone who deserves to get in gets in, and you got security and a lot of things like that. But Dooku and a lot of these guys with the dinners that, you and I were gone by Saturday, but they did a great job, and they used the same technology, which was certainly a win for that technology, that they kind of like owned the ticket mastery, QR code vibe of our immutable ticket on our phones. But it was a cool experience to know that a lot, whether that company is the front runner and 7 years from now, I mean, all tickets for concerts and stuff, like they're going to be different collectibles, and it's all going that way. That's a whole different
Stay tuned
show.
For another episode of Decentralized Dawn.
Yeah, that one's exciting because disco came from the music industry, and I used to work for a very large music organization as well, but I haven't grown up with disco. A lot of my influences and understanding of how the sausage is made and that business came from disco. So for that, I thank you. So, I mean, the parties were awesome. There's the premium brands, but then there's the little stuff like, I'm wearing the Azuki sweatshirt. It's heavy. It's quality. I think it was $150. which, for a premium brand, and with inflation, let's be honest, like $150 is like, it's like the new $48. Like, it sucks, but it's true. And my 83 children used to watch Phineas and Ferb a lot when they were younger. And there's a whole episode on the aglet, and the aglet is the end of the string. It's the thing. This is like industrial grade, like SpaceX aglet. But where I do have a gripe, the microphone's hiding it. My ring that that the string goes into, the ring already broke off. So I think after hearing your comments earlier, it's like they're gonna try different distributors. They're gonna see what works. They're gonna see what margins work best for them and what partnerships where. Because Azuki people want stuff. Yeah, Ambush is cool. I'm too old to probably know how cool Ambush is, but Azuki people at the end of the day want Azuki really good branded stuff. And I would say, except for the aglet ring, we'll call it, the sweatshirt is good quality. Another thing I'll bring up at that Vegas party that I thought was kind of a letdown, and this is also based off a conversation from actually the first garden party. Being an old guy, I kind of like hung out, danced a little, and then I sat down and kind of talked to the people who also sat down by the bench by the Twin Tigers jacket. And there was a girl who sat down to rest her feet next to us, and I started talking to her, and she actually was an ambassador, or she worked for a company for a premium brand, and she was explaining to me, she's like, no, there's 93 red flags on why they failed on a premium brand. And I'm like, they just started. They started 3 months ago. And she's like, that line alone, like, you got if you want to go premium brand and premium experience, you've got everything. It's the Michelin 3-star restaurant experience. Everything has to be perfect, because if it's not, like, the 2-star Michelin experience is simply unacceptable. So it's a tall order. I'm not a premium brand guy myself. Like, yeah, I probably have a nice watch sitting in a drawer somewhere, but I don't care that much. But it opened my eyes to how important that would be to get it right. And I will call it a fail at that Azuki Vegas event. Remember, I bought my merchandise, and then we had fun, and we got to see a lot of the Sense of Being. So I was excited about that, and we had a great time at the party. And then we went out after, and you called it. You're like, dude, let's get out of here. Let's get up front. Let's get your stuff. And I'm like, well, I was lingering, talking to folks. Disco was right. Had we left like 7 or 8 minutes earlier, the line that was an hour and a half line to get the clothes. Like, I don't care if I'm waiting in line for 15 minutes, but after a party, you're tired, or you want to go to the next, I should speak for the old guy. I was tired. A lot of people were just probably like, their buzzes were just like starting to catch up. They were raring to go. And that was the beginning of the night. But that was, I took a picture of the line, and I just walked out, and, I figured, I'm like, they'll ship it to me, or I'll get it in the morning. We got it in the morning. Even then, the web reception was bad. So it was a poor logistical execution. And, that's for US, that's party 3. Globally, that's party 4 or 5. Like, come on. Even if you're not going to go the premium clothing and premium brand route, because these, JPEGs are so expensive, and it's expensive to be a part of this community, you got to be that anyway.
Yeah. And just on that, like, you didn't even mention the fact that when we left, they ran out of the swag bags, and you have people flying in from everywhere. You should at least have enough to cover the people with the tickets, with the bag, of whatever it is to leave. Not to be in defense or anything like that, but can you imagine how many people Zag and all those guys are interfacing with and getting pitched to, hey, use us, use that. And, it's a lot of, they're going to have a lot of meetings, a lot of offers, and it's going to take a while to kind of figure out how to, drill down on what they want to focus on and what they want to develop and grow. We have friends who've started clothing businesses, and just the work to figure out how that's going to go. So then again, to expect them to have the islets figured out, within 18 months on top of, doing all these other things. Think of like,
it's
they're having,
it's an aglet, sir. Just that's, I needed to interrupt you on that. It's an aglet.
All right. Sorry. But I mean, they're sitting there doing, promotions with like the Super Bowl MVP. So just imagine the amount of meetings and the amount of opportunities and the amount of what's really necessary now is really focus and filter, right? So what does make sense of the brand to take it to this level, and what does it want to be? We haven't had, since it's such a new space, there's not really a roadmap of, hey, this is how you kind of do it. You toil and be credible for a while, and then you go here. This is so heightened in terms of how short the expectation line is of the development, that there's just a lot of things that I think we need to consider. And the fact that they pulled off really cool looking sweatshirts and gear and stuff like that makes me excited about what could come from just kind of a streetwear side of it. So if you really look at it and zoom out and think, okay, you have Marvels and some of these big brands, they're doing one thing core and then other things come of it. But it almost feels like there's a lot of different opportunities to build the scaffolding in different industries from this. And I think that's what, the passion of the holders that I was running into is based on. Like, dude, you don't even know where this can go. And maybe it's naive. Maybe they're, whining people's watches and getting everyone pumped up on this. And there's nothing on, there's no substance to the cake, but there's something there that's keeping people interested. And I think that it's smart to give them some time to develop. I do agree with you that it'd be great to have more transparency in terms of, hey, this is what we're looking to do. These are some of our priorities. This is where we're at with it. But again, what NFT, operations before them can they model themselves on? None, because it's such a new space. So we don't really know how this needs to be done, or what the best practice moving forward is to launch a digitally native lifestyle brand, which is essentially what I think they're going for. And I think they're pretty close.
It's a good point, because like you said, like Yuga they single-handedly in this modern, we'll call it the utility NFT era, have paved the path. And Azuki's core capability of what they're good at, and really what the brand screams would be a success, is really different than Yuga. And that's why I think now you're seeing them kind of go away from that, and they're going to have to take the road less traveled now. They have been kind of riding on Yuga's, kind of riding and kind of slipstreaming off them a little, but now in a bear, this airdrop kind of hurt them. But you make a good point that, like, it sounds like the beginning, where we talked about the first 90 million up to the first 18 months was like, hey, this was the kickoff opener. Thanks for a lot of people believing in us. Now we're doing the big raise. We have a plan. So I guess maybe I'm too close to it, but I would ask you, as a newer person putting a close eye to this, do you think, does this feel like a rug to you?
Well, one thing I'd say and I don't know, and I should have looked into it more, but I don't know anything really about Chiru or, who's involved in that. But I do know that, like, Yuga basically implemented and integrated very influential established people within the entertainment industry. And, that was kind of what happened. You saw it kind of leak out from that perspective. So they kind of went with power brokers within the establishment.
They definitely did. Yeah.
And that's probably what jump started them, to get them at the level that they were in a short period of time. So I'm not debating if that was cool or not, or good or not, but I just don't know the same about the leadership and the, strategic side of it from this perspective. But I think that's important to note. You're getting some old school, heavy influential industry players that are kind of guiding the ship on the Yuga side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a good segue too, to get into just the community. Cause I think without the art for everyone to rally around, and without the dripping of the brand and the vibe, the community would not have formed. Now, I would say the community has taken on a life of its own. within and without of Chiru Labs and Azuki, and some of the products that are coming out are just beautiful. This one by Ted Chemo and Udo Collective. I believe it's like literally homemade whiskey with your tumblers, your glasses, your coasters, and everything. I mean, it's just beautiful. And if I didn't give Sunway a shout out, he's one of my favorites as well too. He's probably one of the most positive people. I never met him in real life, but in spaces, he's always just super positive and is always kind of taking the looking at the bright side of life, which I think, especially in this space, we need a lot more of. But, it's just super cool stuff. And, whoa, that's too loud. So I'll stop it there. Sorry, I didn't realize how loud of it. That's actually how loud it was in there. That was the first party. That's where we sat most of the time, me and Ellen. But that jacket, that was a homemade, one of one Twin Tigers jacket, the prototype. And it was, they nailed that thing. And, I've got two in there, maybe, I don't know if I can pull it off anymore, but it is so well constructed. And, they took some pictures early and people were like, these pictures make it look like garbage. And they're like, no. Someone took a flat picture, like get rid of those, get rid of that in your mind. And when those things delivered, I got two of them. The fit was good, and I'm not an easy person to fit for. I'm kind of like tall and wiry and slim, but the fit was good. And it was like, they're heavy jackets and they're reversible. Like sometimes one side gets completely, just like, oh, and then there's the inside. Like it was that jacket was solid. So as far as what they've made, like as much as I make fun of the aglet rings, like they nailed the Twin Tigers jacket. It took them a while, but as you said, did it in the grand scheme of things? Like, is that really a while, or is that just you guys being impatient, wanting more cool stuff?
I know. And also just on that side, just every company was having trouble producing things over the past, 2 years in terms of supply chain and everything like that. So there's a lot of, kind of X factors. And I didn't want to dodge the question of, do you think it's a rug or not? I'm of the camp that you got to give it time to marinate a little bit, and if they didn't have the quality of some of the elements already in place, then it'd be easy to say, yeah, it's a rug, but it feels like there's potentially quite a bit of creative substance underneath it. And I think you kind of got to let the dog walk off leash for a little bit and see where it goes, because to me, it's one of the more compelling, stories of an evolving brand there is, because it's really like, where are they going to choose to go, and how are they going to, spray their special sauce into these different industries. And I don't know, if it's a rug, it's a high ceiling rug, I guess would be what I would say.
I've met enough of these guys and seen online, like they are into this brand and they are into this product. Most of the key players I know are vested for 4 years, I believe. Okay. So that would be what, 20, 3, 4, 5, 26, 4 plus 2 is 6, right? I probably could have done that.
Good work.
The addition way and not on my fingers. But so they have till, early 26 or late 25 to really make a dent. And then, some guys who could, maybe one of the coders or some people could walk then, but the runway, they were smart. They built a runway in. It's not, it wasn't 2 years or 1 year where, like right after this, all the contracts ended. That would, probably have been quite bad. But I don't think it's a rug either, and looking at what we're on the screen right now, Halumia, it's in its early stages, but they're very slowly building an entire ecosystem. And there's a lot of nods in there to early collectors and kind of some of the Twitter memes that went around with different thing. Like I think one time I wasn't in on that one, but it was like, where's Demna or something like, and they have badges for that online. And Halumia has a whole bunch of different things kind of highlighting different holders. I think if you ever won they've done these things where like Azuki Love Island, like what's the best looking Azuki, the winners get a badge, which obviously not many winners, so that's a pretty coveted one to get. And they're hinting at games in there and merchandise and stuff, so they're building it. It is fun to go in there. They've got some chill music in there, and Halumia is a nice touch. And we forget on the technology side, like I remember I think it was October, and I was with my kids and a bunch of their friends, and they were like running around in a corn maze of all things. And I had on the spaces of the big skateboard drop, and it was cool because I was sitting by a campfire, and I just brought all the kids myself, so no one to hang out with, and I just had my headphones in, and I was listening to all the commentary and watching Spirit DAO come with a bigger bid or Dingaling come with a bigger bid, and it was like, being a skater, this was, and I think even Tony Hawk's gotten his hands on one of these, like this was, the whole skaters of the internet, like this to me was a big win. And the PBT technology of the physical backed token of being able to scan immutably and say what you own was ahead of its time, and it was a huge win. I don't know if we benefit yet as holders, but it's certainly as an ecosystem, as they flesh this whole thing out, it's super cool to see. And I think the whole launch of the 12 golden skateboards was a big boost for the community and a big win. And I would argue, if I went back to those slides, I'll bet you that's when volume kind of started picking up again. At least it was around there. It was a cool event.
It's cool.
Yeah, for sure. And they've also helped, I think the community has in many ways taken over its own organization, but they've provided the tools, and I will say it, I'm not in a ton of communities, but Rose and Demna and that whole team, as far as community managers, they are definitely the best in the business. There's not even again, I'm not in a ton of them, but they care. I mean, I think when all this FUD happened, Demna was like, I've got meetings scheduled all day, every day, and that will continue as long as you guys need me, and I'm here like forever. And Rose has always been awesome. You got to meet her at the Vegas event too. Super nice. Just, that's a tough job, and you get a lot of people just, half the people are crazy and half the people are complaining, and you got to somehow create a community out of them, because the sane people probably aren't posting, 4,800 times an hour. So you gotta balance all that. I do not, that's a tough job, and they're the best in the business. So hats off to them for organizing community. But again, it goes
if you have the leadership or the strategy to provide tools to empower the community to create, what's going to come, and that's what's so exciting. It's almost like not A&Ring, but kind of, giving, having a staple or a farm system. And, I would venture to say that I'd be really tuned into some of those folks who are kind of leading that effort from the community up, and really keep track of some of those things that might have a lot of traction and could grow into something. I love that they're incorporating that into that other ecosystem that they're trying to create, and giving nods to it, because that's only going to empower and, enthuse more people to, create cool derivatives. Ultimately, probably one of the most talented people involved with Azuki overall could potentially be a holder who's going to come up with some really interesting, derivative style stuff that could take off. So that's really, that's powerful to see that they're really, giving the tools and, kind of letting people develop and see what can come of that. So that's a really interesting piece.
Yeah, you make a good point. And I love your analogy of the farm system. Obviously for spirit holders, they're the royalty of the collection. They right. Should be. The spirits, I don't know if I've talked about it enough. I think I'm about to show a couple, but it's the Azuki spirit is, I think, among all PFP collections, I'm not talking art, we're just talking PFPs here. I think the spirits are as badass as they come. And I probably get a lot of flack for this, but I'd put them up there with some of the cooler crypto punks. There's just something very transcendental about them. And that's why I want to see like the guardrails for these stories. But they've been very good at bringing in not only the whales and making sure they're happy, but also the people who are contributing. Like I know a lot of the early people, they'll have a special dinner for them. The first night you and I got there, when we just hung out and caught up ourselves and talked about our families and our childhoods and all that stuff, they had a great dinner for a whole bunch of people just to like welcome them and create that. I don't know if it was a farm system, but saying like, hey, we are this kind of group, and I don't know if this is the right place or where the right place is, but Azuki is also hamstrung. Like you, with good old Gary Gensler and U.S. securities laws, even if they wanted to, or Yuga or anyone, or maybe they don't, but I think they probably do. They probably would want holders to be stakeholders and get rewards, but you can't cross that line right now. It's just the laws in America right now just blow, and that's obviously what's leading the charge right now for certainly Azuki because they're out of California. But that's a whole probably different podcast episode. Yeah. But that is such a limiting factor where you can't just simply share revenues and give people a dividend off of a collection as you start to build out from Web 3 to Web 2 or whatever.
That's another show.
Yeah, that's definitely another show. So again, this is my favorite one. And this one, actually, I picked this before it happened, but this is one of my favorite Azuki, if not it's subtle, it's cool, it's the spirit, it's the messy hair, it's the subtle golden bean, and he's got the hat. It's like, this one exudes cool to me. Interestingly, I am pretty sure Iced Coffee sold this to protect the floor. I think what happened, if I'm not mistaken, he took this Azuki, sold it to another whale, and basically to protect the blur floor, they set the floor at 3.69, and I'll get into that in a bit. But so this Azuki actually has some significance. I know it changed his hands. He had it for several months from another guy who bought high and then panicked and sold it low. He's like, yeah, I'll take it off you. And he got it for a good price. But it's just interesting how these things pop up, and I just put it up, and it actually is kind of a part of these current stories. But, the one thing about the community that has to be said too is, and I've said this for a while, and what makes me so bullish on Azuki, this is literally just what I grabbed, whatever, it was probably a week or two ago in early September, late August 23. I just grabbed the art that was on the timeline of the day. I'll bet you there's more derivative art for Azuki than every other collection combined. And I would even go as far to say combined times like 10. Like because Bored Apes aren't, there's certainly a lot of derivatives, probably a mutants and Bored Apes and stuff, but Azuki just lends itself to, you want to see them in action. You want to see them in different places. And a lot of collections, I'm trying to think of any other collection that comes even close. But Azuki, the derivative art is, there's Patrick Mahomes. There's kind of the latest plug with certainly one of the greatest quarterbacks playing right now, and with that athletic ability and that slingshot arm from the side, possibly most athletic dude you've seen on that football field in decades. So, I mean, just the art is just amazing and varied, and it's so much different. And I did try and give credit to each the artists who did this, but there's so many. And I mean, look at this one. This is a Sam. I'm always going to favor Sam Gildas because my first derivative was with my first two actually were with Sam. This elemental could be one of the coolest of all 30,000, but just such a great animation. And it's so cool to see how much art there is. And the more art you do, the more vested you are in this project as a holder. Cause I've got all this derivative art. If I just bail on all the OGs now, like, and my Azuki, what do I have? That art loses kind of its luster. Conger made a really good point, and I wanted to just reflect on this as we get into our final thoughts. He made a point about, some of these big whales, if they held, it's kind of like thank the whales. Because if they dumped, there'd be nothing. And I agree with that. In fact, the top 50 wallets, and granted, I didn't filter out like BendDAO in there, so the top 2 are probably the lending protocols, but the top 50 wallets own 38% of all Azuki. So even if you took BendDAO in there, call it probably 32% or something. It's a lot, right? So a third of the collection is owned by these top 50 whales. So the whales are extremely important, and they should be catered to. But I would argue, and this is an important point, whales are completely they're locked in. Let's say you're a whale and you've got a bunch of mid rares and you got 3 spirits or something. Like, of the 97 spirits are out there, you could probably dump 1 a month, 2 a month, and it would in a bear, and it would be okay. Otherwise, those spirits are going to go from right now, I think the floor is 60. They're going to go to 50 to 40 to 30. It just falls too fast. So the whales are super important, but the only place where I differ from Conger, there is that market liquidity. They can't dump. And I think the bummer for them, I think a lot were very honest this time around, but I also noticed a lot of them, and rightfully so, they quickly circle the wagons and they're like, a lot of those guys were all in anyway, but they also didn't really have a choice. At this point, you're not going to sell now. I think Azuki's going to go up again, and you might thin a little. You might hedge a little and take some off the table just because now that we're at 50,000 collection, but there's just not enough liquidity, and the whales are in. I think, especially Spirit DAO, those guys they're awesome, and they would have been in anyway, but there really isn't a choice now. So I didn't know where to fit this in, but it was an important point to drive home at some point. That's how dry the liquidity is right now.
Do you think the that percentage of whale ownership, so to speak, holds across other collections as well, or do you think it's more unique to this?
No, I think every collection has whales to totally differing degrees. One stat that everyone looks at is holder count, kind of saying hey, the more you spread it out, the bigger the ecosystem is. And that's totally true. But even CryptoPunks, I think, are 3,700 owners, because remember, it was a free mint back in 2017. A lot of these guys, a lot were lost, right? But also a lot are held by some of these whales who got in early, made a bloody fortune over the years. I think Azuki's at 4,300. It's just another stat. The higher the number, the better, but it's not. I don't think it's the be all end all, and I don't think Azuki stands out from any other collection as having way more concentration or way less. But I know this ecosystem better, and guys like Dingaling and some of these other guys are holding just grail after grail after grail. I mean, there are certain guys who, and some of these guys are in the ordinal space too, but these guys have amazing collections, and they're probably in it for the long run. But right now, I definitely don't envy all of their positions. I've always been kind of a spread it out. I've never really been a whale in any collection, and maybe I'm more conservative. I'd rather stake a lot of my ETH and kind of get an annuity than go all in on NFTs. Because, remember, if the price of ETH skyrockets, new entrants are wait, I'm not, it kind of resets the price of the NFT, and that's a danger too. If ETH goes back to 4, 5, 6,000 now, or back to 4, and then it, if it went to 5 or 6, you get new entrants, or how do I even, I'll get a bean or maybe an elemental, maybe, but that's a tough one to get into. Only the people who have been in the ecosystem and have made the money off the growth of the ETH and kind of already had big bags can kind of play that game. So that puts pressure on it too. And that's something people need to think about when they hold just a ton a ton of stuff. But I think the net is, and where I think Conger or where everyone would agree, and the Spirit DAO, it's not just the whales, it's all the holders. But though in this case, some of the most fervent and the best holders and the most prolific, and Spirit DAO created a comic. The whales and the hardcore holders are one and the same, right? Which I guess I kind of fell backwards into a lucky answer, but that could be what separates Suzuki from other things. A lot of whales are super fans and really good diamond hand holders. So I can't speak for a ton of collections, but for Azuki, I can say, yeah, these guys, they're the guys you want holding a lot of bags are the guys holding a lot of bags.
And I think that probably goes back to what we started the show way back when we started the beginning of the show, when you showed your first Azuki and you were like, it just resonated with me. So I think that there really is something tied to the quality of the art and the emotions associated with the art that have people feel very sticky with the brand overall and with it, so there's a lot of collections out there. I'm open-minded to almost all of them, but some of the art does not have this sort of depth or tentacles where it like hits you on an emotional level. And that's something to think about when you just look at this thing overall. Like, does it really come down to just how this art can really kind of transcend and resonate with people that you're going to want to keep more? And, then when you have these levels of, these spirits just being leveled up and up in terms of the quality and the intricacies, it's remarkable to kind of take a step back and look at. And it kind of does seem to come back to this quality of art.
Yeah. And it's amazing. And the transcending of the art is such a good point that we keep going back and back to. And, if I actually told a couple of our childhood friends like that we were doing a show, and I said, you're probably not going to understand. It's a lot of inside baseball and things you won't understand about. But the reason I bring that up is they probably, like, if you said, oh yeah, and this one's 36,000, but no. It's, it's a fire hair trade or whatever. And I'm just spitballing. They'd be like, dude, sell it if you can and run. Like,
buy a car.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense. But when you get into the space, all of a sudden it just, the first time I scrolled the Azuki on OpenSea, it was just like, maybe I went to reptilian brain or all common sense. I'm lucky enough where I got some Bitcoin and ETH earlier when it was at a cheaper price, but I was so protective of it because I'm like, I'm not buying an NFT. It was the first time where I'm like, where's my hardware wallet? Like, where is it? I got to buy this one before somebody else does. Like, it was the first time my brain just got hijacked. And it's amazing what art and a picture can do. I'm not a big gambler at all, and I never have been. Maybe with friends around the table where we're all on equal footing and it's more like, like I can beat you. It's almost a competitive thing with a buddy, but losing a lot of money, like, it just never appealed to me. And in a way, this is a form of gambling or quote unquote investing. There's probably a word in the middle like invest gambling or gamvlestling, but
right.
It's nothing. It's like nothing else. And this is just the first use case of a technology that's just like makes your mind just go absolute boom. The Spirit DAO and the holders, though, my point in the demand more from Chiru, like right now with this elemental drop, and again, I'm going to really digest what you said in this because I think my stance is definitely softening, and I appreciate that. I'm in it more for the long game. But right now, I will say with that bag drop on us, and especially the whales and the core holders, like, we got left holding a big old bag, and we're holding it now in hopes of, that they are going to deliver. They know what they're doing. They don't owe us any money or remuneration. And like I said, with securities, they can't do anything. But like right now, Spirit DAO, like these guys did something that, before we launch into our final conversation, this is just a take. I just put it up there because while I was researching, but like D-Gods fumbled, Zaga, Moonbirds, Digi, Ranga, like, does any of these people have a clue what they're doing with these airdrops and to go to 50,000? And, I actually, I wrote as a failing inevitable, and having done the research, my conclusion already was no. And now I would say more emphatically, no, it is possible. And I don't know what odds I'd give it. Like, I don't know, like that'd be an interesting thought exercise right now. Just 10 years. What do you think the odds of Azuki being, whether acquired or not, but being like a bigger brand than today, whatever that means to you? What would you give the odds right now?
Suffice it to say, I got in when everything was very expensive. And
most people do.
I relate to what you were saying about, what an ETH is, and, if it goes up and everything like that. But I'll say I've had, times in my life where I, help to identify, potential songs or artists or bands and, kind of see, where things can go. And I guess I keep coming back, and I guess this is my thesis, if you will, based on this conversation, is you can't underestimate how certain art hits. So if you hear, a certain album that just from start to finish, once you first hear it, it's like, it's transcendental. Like, it changes your perspective, and it changes your judgment, and it changes your perspective. And
Beastie Boys, Paul Boutique is just what comes to my mind first. I remember that was the cassette tape era, and they had
with the different colors,
green, black, yellow. Mine was red. Mine was red.
I recall.
That was
in the Accord.
I was never a big thank you for that. I was never a big Beastie Boys fan before that. I thought it was just frat boy garbage, and I think they agreed. But Paul's Boutique was when it literally just blew minds across the globe.
Yeah. But same, and another show, but when you first hear the beginning of Moon Safari, you change your perspective on music again. It's like, things can go.
French band Moon Safari, by the way, people, because that's a deep cut.
Yeah. So my point is the fact that it could compel you to scroll through the entire collection and essentially onboard you as a, more seasoned person in the space to have the emotion override the logic to go to your hardware wallet and purchase something. That to me is something not to bet against. And, I know the statements up here with D-Gods and everything like that, that's all true at this point, but we're still, I don't want to say we're at the dawn of this whole thing. We don't even know the functionality and where things can turn into and where this can go. But if something hits, it hits. If something slaps, it slaps. And those can transcend, and really that is not to be underestimated. And that's kind of my overall net. Since we were at Vegas, I was contemplating, how do I get into this? What do I do? Where do I, what's my entry point and everything? And I was kind of, wanted to, and I want this to be something that people would understand about what we're trying to do with this program overall, is we want to go into these discussions without a central thesis in place. Like, we don't want to say, hey, we believe this is what's going to happen with the show. So I genuinely have been watching and looking and, kind of seeing some of the research that you've been doing, and it's compelled me to a point of action, which is, I think I'd like to enter the garden, and I got to figure out which way to do it, but I don't want to be on the side with it. Yeah, I don't want to be on the side with it. I wish I came in and, got ETH at $20 or whatever. So I got to be a little measured in terms of my entry point. But, and just to kind of play that out further in looking at the different, kind of sub brands or opportunities, I'm leaning pretty aggressively towards an elemental purchase, because there's a couple that speak to me. Actually, one of them was shown earlier in the program. And I would be remiss after having this conversation and hearing your story and seeing the depth of the folks in the community and the passion and what they're working on, as well as, you know, the fact that they came up with this in the first place. Like Azuki didn't exist, you know, 18 months ago, so to speak, or anything like that. So I'm compelled to join and to get involved, and I think it'll be a very interesting journey, you know, no matter how it goes.
Wow. Well, that's exciting. We will not publish this until you have made the purchase. So someone's like, I'm going to front run this sucker and sell it to them for double.
We'll be keeping it quiet.
Yeah. You know, somebody would do that. Yeah, it's just interesting. There's one other element I wanted to hit on, which was, Demna, I didn't love this one, but it was basically created by many, owned by all. But after talking and really fleshing this out with you, Disco, today, my stance is softer. Like, this was one of the things that pissed me off a little bit. It was like created by many, owned by all. And my thing is like, it's not owned by all. The 138 plus million went to Chiru Labs and the owners there. And again, with securities laws, like you can't tie in and give us annuities through our NFTs, which hopefully when this regime in America changes and we get smarter, more progressive people with financials, that will happen. But, you know, you don't fully own your Azuki, but they do have really cool IP and licensing rights. And Chiru owns Azuki, but they have a really good, the IP rights are good, but you don't own it. And I just want to say to Demna, like, after the Elemental launch, like the circle the wagon, like, and maybe that's where you're just like, dude, like you said, the guy's the best community manager out there. He give him some slack, like, because he does believe that it is created by many, owned by all. It's just, I was like, it's not owned by all, but now I do, I've got a better perspective on that. So I'm not going to sit on it too long. And with the IP rights, it is kind of cool. Like, you can basically, non-commercial, you can put your Azuki anywhere, and you know, that image, you could do basically whatever you want with it, non-commercial. And, you know, and then you go to commercial and you basically can make derivatives, you can sell things off it, you could do other NFT collections, you could do clothing lines, you could do the whole kit and caboodle. So those IP rights, you know, tying a lot of what you were saying, why you're so excited about this. I love the analogies you keep making with bands, but this is with decentralization, blockchain, and Ethereum in particular here. You can, the potential with IP rights and all this stuff is so much more. Like with a band, I can get their t-shirt, call myself a super fan, and that's really your only badge, right? It's your shirt. It's, you know, maybe a ticket stub if you're dorky enough to show someone who came over how loyal you are, you know, maybe your Grateful Dead book of all the tickets you went to and stuff. But, you know, if you're a fan, people know by the shirts you wear and, you know, how you dress and how you behave and stuff. But the analogy here with music is interesting.
Spoiler alert, that is looking like that'll be an upcoming program where we talk a little bit about how NFTs can impact the relationship between artists and fans of music. So stay tuned.
Yeah, that one's coming up soon because Disco is, again, came from those roots, and I can't wait to talk about it too. So the royalties there are, you know, they're good. So what's keeping Azuki alive? Community, thriving derivative art ecosystem, and products and IP on top of that community, right? So it's everything that's keeping them alive. And interestingly, that spirit that I showed you, Spirit DAO did something which I thought was pretty badass. But again, you know, they're locked in, but they're locked in, and they're going to defend their garden. And I tip my hat to them for that. But basically a bunch of them put in a bid wall on Blur at 3.69. And interestingly, that bid wall sent the price up to the fours. And this snapshot was taken a couple weeks ago. So it actually was really effective. And that bid wall was huge at 3.69. Then actually a higher bid wall went in. Well, fast forward now, here's the thing. And my final point on community is the community right now, while while Chiru Labs and Azuki gets their stuff together and really lays out this groundwork. I don't want them to tell us their whole roadmap, but while they figure this stuff out, the community is propping this floor place up, and that could have saved the floor from going to a 1 or a 2. I'm guessing Azuki, especially OG, they're not going below 1, but probably not even 2. But it held it up. But if you fast forward to now, just a couple weeks later, that wall in comparison doesn't look so big, and it's right back down to that 3.69. So they've got hundreds of these bids holding that wall up, and that's an interesting thing about this non-liquid thing. You can actually, a couple whales can do that. So that's where I agree with Conger. Like, thank you for posting that up. But I would argue that right now, this is a lot of pressure on the community when Azuki and Chiru Labs, like, I'm going to soften my stance big time from our conversation today, big time. And I'm actually bullish again. I was bullish from the research, but your perspective made me even more bullish. But they've got to, now that they've collected this 40 million, they've got to deliver. And it doesn't have to, I don't even want to say fast, but they've got to be smart and execute well, whatever it is, whether it's animation or going the premium route with the Supreme clothing line angle. Like, they've got to deliver.
Yeah. You can't, people who are tied into the community are, loyal to it at this point, but at some point that can break. So it's time. You're right. It's put up or shut up. It's time to, bring it home. And it doesn't mean they have to put out like a blockbuster right away, but they need to, bring back some red meat to show folks that, hey, the faith is justified, and keep with us on that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any final thoughts you want to share? I mean, mine are this has been, there's always a pitfall. If you do too much research, you're going to be set in your ways. You're going to go through and just you're kind of like trying to build a story to prove your point. And I think your perspective helped me walk that back and just stay with kind of each phase of how all this happened. And that this is such a, like the biggest catchphrase in this industry is, dude, you're so early. This is so new. And, it's true. Like, anyone listening to this, you're early, because this hasn't even remotely broken into the mainstream yet. Thank you all. Have a great day. And that was the wrap.
As always, Decentralized On exists strictly for entertainment purposes. It is not financial advice. Please be sure to always do your own research before making any investments.